Welcome to our May lunchtime learning event from North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children Partnership. I'm really pleased that we are being joined today by some guest speakers. We've got Kerry and Kira from IDAS who are going to kind of be taking you through the next hour. So I'm going to hand over to Kira and Kerry. Welcome. And just tell me when you need me to move the slides on.
Lovely, thank you, Kat. Hi everyone, so my name's Kira and I work for the organisation IDAS. I work in a split role as a children and families domestic abuse practitioner and an independent sexual violence advisor. And then my colleague Kerry is here today as well, and she also works in a split role as a children and families domestic abuse practitioner and a children's worker within our York Refuge. If you could have the next slide, please. Okay. So IDAS is the largest specialist domestic abuse service in the north of England, offering regional support in both North and South Yorkshire for victims of domestic and sexual violence. We have a regional team of staff and volunteers all working towards a shared goal of ending abuse and violence. IDAS started out as York Women's Aid nearly 50 years ago and has grown since that time. And like I sort of said, we have a dedicated team of staff and volunteers supporting survivors across the region. Next slide, please.
So this is just a brief summary of sort of 2025 for the service of IDAS. So we'll go into a little bit more depth in the next couple of slides around what the services are that we offer. But in total, in 2025, we responded to over 29,513 calls on our helpline. That's from a mixture of professionals and victims and survivors. We trained roughly around 12,805 professionals. We accommodated 318 families within our safe accommodation. We responded to 1,952 live chats on our website and supported over 8,000 adults and children in the service. And in total, we received over 20,000 referrals within 2025. Next slide, please, Kat. Next slide, please, Kat. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's lovely. So within IDAS, we have a number of services available to support those who have experienced both domestic abuse and sexual violence. So we have our community teams that are spread across North and South Yorkshire, made up of independent domestic violence advisors who provide specialist domestic abuse support to adult survivors of abuse. This support is both emotional and practical around the impacts of that abuse, keeping the survivor safe, exploring their options with regard to the criminal justice process, offering them safe accommodation, and also offering groups such as the Moving On from Domestic Abuse programme at IDAS. We also have an independent sexual violence service which support anybody who's been impacted by sexual violence and abuse regardless of their age. This support is primarily around criminal justice proceedings, providing emotional and practical support to a survivor who's navigating this process. This support work can also be in the form of exploring the impacts of sexual trauma, helping someone to develop coping mechanisms, working on their self-esteem and confidence, and similar to the IDFA service, running groups such as the Moving On from Sexual Abuse programme. We also have a children and families service at IDAS, which offers supports to families who have been impacted by domestic abuse and those who are also experiencing child and adolescence to parent violence and abuse. This support is delivered through group work, one-to-one work with a parent and carer, and one-to-one support with a young person. At IDAS, we have safe accommodation provisions, including women's-only shared refuges, and also dispersed properties that can accommodate people where a shared refuge may not meet their needs. And IDAS also provides training to professionals via our specialist training team in the form of sort of online webinars, face-to-face training, and sort of tailored training packages as well, which are requested for sort of specific needs and events. Next slide, please.
So alongside our sort of main services with that client-facing work almost. We also offer helplines and live chat. The confidential helpline operates 365 days of the year, 8 till 6 p.m. on weekdays and 11 till 8 p.m. on weekends and bank holidays. That can be accessed by both professionals and survivors and victims. We also have the live chat, which is available on our website. Again, that can be confidential for both professionals and survivors and victims, and that can be accessed from 1 p.m. till 4 p.m. just on weekdays. We also have other sort of specialist services. So we have a specific family court team who focus on both prevention of family court and supporting those who are already in the family court proceedings and supporting them through that process. And they also have their own specialist website as well, and their own specific live chat, which you can access through their website. Obviously, Kira's already touched upon the safe accommodation, and then we also support people to stay safe in their own homes. So that can be around target hardening, looking at how if fleeing domestic abuse into a refuge is not an option for whatever reason, how can we support them in staying as safe as possible within their own home? Next slide, please, Kat.
Thank you. So today's event is going to sort of focus around the Children and Families Service at IDAS in a bit more detail, and like we said earlier, focusing on some case studies as well to give some practical suggestions around support. So the Children and Families Service at IDAS has a team across North Yorkshire of specialist children and families domestic abuse practitioners. Our team also operates its own independent hub, which helps process our referrals and work alongside other agencies, offering support and advice to professionals. We offer detailed assessments with survivors, we collaborate with a range of external agencies, we take a strengths-based whole family and trauma-informed approach to working, and we seek to empower those that we support. Next slide.
So just for a point of reference really with the referral and the assessment process. So once a referral can be made via our website, which is up on the screen for you as well. And once a referral is received, we'll make contact with the referrer within 72 hours of us receiving that. We've slightly changed our referral process recently, so some of you may or may not have referred in prior and it might look slightly different now, but we actually hold referral discussions for professionals on a Monday PM and a Wednesday AM weekly. This is really allowing us at the minute to sort of streamline our referral process and ensure that we're gathering a lot of information that we need for that family and ensuring that it's safe to support them based on their circumstances and to ensure that we are the correct service for support at that time. Once that's been completed, we'd complete a triage assessment with the family, and what we'll do throughout that process is look at a DASH risk assessment, understanding that level of risk, which then can inform our safety planning. And we'll also explore with them that whole family approach of their support plan needs. So looking at not only the circumstances around the domestic abuse and the family at that point, but also looking at general home life, finances, mental health, and sort of exploring those other support needs. And a real big part of that is that multi-agency working. So from gathering that information from the referrers right from the start, whether that be school, social care, whether it be a health professional, but then also signposting and referring to the correct professionals based on what that family needs at the time. Next slide, please, Kat.
Okay. So the support that we offer in the Children and Families Service is sort of twofold. So we offer support to children, parents and carers who have been impacted by domestic abuse. And we also support children, parents and carers where the young person might be displaying abusive behaviours. So child and adolescent to parent violence and abuse, which we'll refer to as CAPVA from now on, just to avoid the mouthful, refers to a dynamic where a young person engages in repeated abusive behaviours toward a parent or an adult caregiver. This behaviour can include physical violence, emotional, economic or sexual abuse, as well as coercive control. CAPVA is a form of family abuse where children and adolescents use harmful behaviours to communicate distress, control their environment, or even hurt and punish others around them. So we would support children on a one-to-one basis between the ages of 10 and 16, following meaningful engagement from a safe parent, usually within our parent support groups that we run online on a rolling basis. We run 2 support groups, one being for the parents and carers whose children have been impacted by domestic abuse, and the other being for those who are impacted by CAPVA. We also work closely with a range of professionals who may be involved with their family, ensuring a wraparound approach to all of their support needs. And where one-to-one support with a child or a young person is not appropriate, we can work with other professionals to ensure their needs are sort of still being met, offering them guidance, support and resources to aid around that family's experience. The Children and Families team can also offer support to young people where they've had an experience of unhealthy or abusive relationships with a peer, where they're no longer in this relationship. This support can be around things such as their safety, managing their emotions, and their understanding of healthy and unhealthy relationships as they move forward. Next slide, please.
And there are some instances where IDAS, Children and Family Service, unfortunately isn't the most appropriate service at that time. There's a little bit of a grey area around this, and there's sort of only one really where it's a hard and fast rule, and that would be if a child or a young person is still living with a perpetrator of abuse or experiencing abuse within the family home, and it's predominantly around safety. So we wouldn't be able to offer support at that time, and we'd be encouraging professionals to explore other services such as children's social care if they're not already involved, looking at that risk element of that and ensuring that they've got the correct support that they need at that time. The rest of them on this sort of list are a real case-by-case basis. So where there's ongoing family court or criminal court proceedings, we'd review this based on the family circumstances at that time. Sometimes where there is sort of court proceedings ongoing, that can really cause a sense of fight or flight consistently within that family home, and essentially would make our work sort of not as productive as maybe when things are a little bit more settled. So it may be that we sort of say, actually, at the minute, we feel that this is a priority need, and we'd explore that in a couple of months' time. But it really is case by case. Again, if there's contact arrangements with the perpetrator, this would be explored further to identify if it's safe to support that family. If a young person is spending more time with their perpetrator than a safe parent, there's actually a high chance that they're still being exposed to a really high element of that abuse, even if it looks slightly different to what it was in the family home. So that would just need exploring a little bit further to ensure that safety. We are a consent-based service, and this also applies to children and young people. So if you are referring into the service, it's really, really important to have those open conversations with young people around what we do and who we are and what that service might look like. We do often get where the parent has consented, but actually the young person knows nothing about the referral, and that can be really daunting for them when somebody just rocks up to school to come and see them for the first time and they've got no information. So it's really important to have those age-appropriate conversations with the whole family about what that service will look like. And then the other one, which is case by case, is where there's an identified higher need of support for the young person or the parent. And that's such as mental health, substance misuse or safety as some examples. Now, that's not saying that we won't work with families where there is substance misuse or where there is mental health need, but it's just sort of identifying what the higher need is at that time and where that priority support needs to come from. And it may be, as Kira said in the last slide, that we sort of feed into that with another agency taking the lead almost, and we just sort of dip in and out rather than being the predominant agency. Next slide, please, Kat.
Lovely. So the Children and Families Service takes that whole family trauma-informed approach, and with each sort of family that we're supporting, we would tailor a package of support to meet their individual needs. So with parents and carers, we could offer telephone support or face-to-face support, depending on what their sort of preferences and what their needs are as a family. We do require that meaningful parental engagement within our service, especially if we are then to look to do one-to-one support with the young person. And as we've previously mentioned, this is usually through attendance at our online parent support groups. These groups cover a range of topics and run on that rolling basis over 4 and 6 weeks. So it might be looking at things like trauma responses and the impact this can have on a child's development and their brain and their behaviours. We then would explore sort of regulation and co-regulation, giving practical strategies to parents that they can try at home with their young person. We'd explore safety planning and managing sort of for behaviours in the home to keep themselves and the young people safe. And we'd also explore sort of anger management strategies that could be done with a young person, especially where there's that CAPFA present. Each parent and carer would be allocated a key worker who'd make regular contact with them throughout their attendance at groups and then afterwards as well, especially if that one-to-one support with the young person is going to begin. So with young people, as Kerry sort of previously mentioned, we would offer those one-to-one sessions, usually held in school, either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on need. And this might be to go through things looking at sort of healthy and unhealthy behaviours, boundaries, self-esteem, the impacts of trauma on behaviour and emotions, building confidence and building resilience, but really is dependent on that child's needs and what they're wanting from their support. We might also do family sessions, so that might be with the young person and the parent, and it might be around sort of building their connection, or talking about boundaries together, again, depending on that family's needs. And we also run ad hoc sort of groups, usually within the school holidays, so these can look different sort of across the different areas in North Yorkshire, but just as an example, we've run groups to Carlton Lodge Activity Centre in the past, which are really sort of focused around getting the young people outside, looking at their well-being and improving their confidence when they sort of engage in a range of different activities with their peers. Thank you. Next slide.
So we've talked a lot about sort of IDAS as a service, and hopefully that's given you a really good summary of what we do and how to access us. But what is domestic abuse and what are the things that we need to be looking for? So the Domestic Abuse Act 2021 is an incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over, who have either been intimate partners or family members, and that's regardless of any gender or sexuality. The Act now recognises children as victims in their own right and does extend that definition to post-separation abuse, and the inclusion of economic abuse as well. It also includes forced marriage, honour-based violence, FGM, and victims can be from any ethnic group or gender. Now, with the post-separation abuse, things might look slightly different, and I think this is something that quite often gets missed, as you know, a family may separate from that abuse and actually the tactics change, and then that can sort of lead to people thinking that the abuse has stopped. But actually, it's quite common that with post-separation abuse, particularly where there's children and young people involved, those tactics of abuse will start to change slightly. So, for example, you know, financial abuse throughout the relationship might include sort of keeping hold of all the finances, only allowing a budget for certain things, whereas with post-separation abuse, that might actually look like withholding child maintenance, maybe even pushing court proceedings as a financial form of abuse, knowing the cost of solicitors and things. So it's just really being mindful that just because one type of abuse has stopped doesn't mean that the abuse has stopped in general. Next slide, please, Kat.
So we've included a list here of the impacts of domestic abuse on children and young people. So these are just examples of some of the key impacts that we might see young people presenting, but obviously it's not an exhaustive list. It's really important to remember that every child can present and behave differently, even those within sort of the same family who might have had similar experiences. The presentation of behaviours may also change over time in young people, so it's important for us to use professional curiosity and not make any assumptions when we approach those who have been impacted by abuse. So, for example, some children may present as sort of coping really well, as high achievers, and display that really people-pleasing sort of behaviour, but there might be a lot more going on underneath that surface. There might be that masking involved, so it's important to sort of unpick that further and still make sure that that child's getting that support. With CAT for behaviours, it may be that that's sort of being seen at home, but in other environments that child is behaving completely differently. So in school, for example. So again, it's sort of really important to still sort of hear what that parent's saying and look at that behaviour in the different settings. Perpetrators of domestic abuse may also claim not to see these behaviours in young people. This might be a way of making the safe parents sort of look bad or questioning their capacity of parenting, or it might just be because the young person is masking in their company due to the fear responses and feeling unsafe. So again, these things can look really different depending on the environment and depending on the individual. Thank you. Next slide.
So I appreciate it's lunchtime, but we're going to ask you to sort of put your thinking brains on a little bit and hopefully have a little bit of interaction over the next few slides. So we're going to present you with a scenario within this slide, and the next couple we're going to sort of unpick the things that we're observing for these young people and then start to explore what are we worried about and what can we do. So in this scenario, we've got Jack, who's 8 years old, and Isabella, who's 14, and they live with their mum, Kate. Dad, Steve, moved out of the family home around a year ago after Kate sought support and advice for the domestic abuse she and the children were experiencing. This included emotional abuse, coercive control, financial control, and periods of physical and violent behaviour. After their father left the home, Jack disclosed that they had both witnessed and experienced the abuse from Steve. However, Isabella has not talked about her experiences. Jack and Isabella both have a really different form of relationship with Steve. Isabella was very close to Steve and often was treated differently to Jack. For example, Isabella, there were fewer boundaries and consequences in comparison. Steve would often try and divide the household, meaning that Isabella would often side with Steve and mirror some of his behaviours towards Kate and Jack. Jack would often become upset during these incidents of abuse, in which Steve would belittle him, calling him weak and pathetic, and telling him that he should man up. Since Steve has left the family home, the children are currently having contact on Thursday evenings and every other weekend. Steve continues to show tactics of post-separation abuse, such as pressuring the children to give information about Kate, bad-mouthing Kate in front of the children, and continued financial abuse via child maintenance and elements of harassment through messages and calls. Next slide, please, Kat. So we've broken it down into the two children. So we've got Isabella. What are we observing? So Kate describes Isabella as having a short fuse and goes from 0 to 100, resulting in periods of verbal abuse, damage to the property, threats to harm Kate and Jack, and risk-taking behaviours such as alcohol and going out late at night. Kate also shared that she finds it difficult to encourage Isabella to access school consistently, and this is often a trigger point for those sort of episodes of escalation. On the days that Isabella does attend school have shared that Isabella is often reluctant to engage in education and will often disrupt the class and be disrespectful to teachers and her peers. She has regular contact with Steve via telephone on the days that she's staying with Kate. If there has been an incident at home, Steve will often encourage her to go and stay with him. And when she returns from that contact, her behaviour is often more heightened with more periods of escalation. There have been concerns that Isabella has self-harmed, and Isabella's relationships with her peers have often been described as volatile. She will struggle if her peers have different thoughts or opinions to her, if she feels left out or challenged, and this can result in peer relationships breaking down very quickly, and Isabella often placing the blame on others. Next slide, please, Kat. And Kate describes Jack as very quiet, withdrawn and emotional. School shares that they have not observed any concerns. He gets on with his work, appears to have good friendships, and school are aware of the family dynamic and feel that he's coping well. On the days up to contact, Kate shares that Jack is more clingy, emotional, and cries a lot, saying he does not want to go. He will want to sleep in Kate's bed and will question her a lot as to what she will be doing while he isn't there. Kate also shares that Jack is very particular and obsessive about certain things, such as his homework not being good enough. If he finds something challenging, he will become very upset and talks very negatively about himself, with a lot of comparisons to others. Although school are not concerned, Kate shared that she's witnessed Jack being overpowered by other children, and he will often just give in to what others want. Next slide, please, Kat. So what are we concerned about? So if I can ask you all just to use the chat box and just have a little think for a couple of minutes as to what are the main key points of things that we're worried about for these two children at this point. While those still come in, we'll work through some of the ones that we've popped on the slide, because I can see that some of you have pointed out some that aren't on here that are absolutely valid. So we'll just do them one by one if that's okay, Kat. So we've got the risk of Isabella's behaviour to Kat and Jack. So that's not just the risk of any physical injury, but also that emotional impact to the whole family, both short and long term. Next one, please, Kat. We've got the risk of Isabella's behaviours to herself, such as that self-harming and alcohol use. And also, as a lot of you have pointed out, that risk of exploitation as well, and how vulnerable she is to that at this point in time. Next one. That school avoidance, we're concerned that that's going to lead to an element of social isolation for Isabella, and also those long-term effects on Isabella's development and those future opportunities and how she'll progress into adult life. School masking for Jack. With that masking, it suggests to school that he's coping, and therefore at this point in time, no further support is in place for Jack. By not acknowledging Jack's experiences, we're worried that this means he continues to struggle on his own, not only impacting his coping skills and how he manages that, but also that sense of self. If his experiences aren't validated, this may also impact his future understanding of what a healthy and okay relationship looks like. The next one. A few of you pointed out that ongoing separation abuse from Steve to all the family. So we can see those tactics are changing. He's now almost sort of using Isabella as that pawn, really, to continue that abuse, that emotional abuse, manipulation, financial control, and a complete disregard for the court orders that are in place as well. The emotional well-being of both children. So we're worried about the short and long-term impacts of their self-esteem, their confidence, their mental health, their relationships, and how they're able to manage their own emotions and regulation. And the emotional impact on Kate and her resilience within parenting. So that feeling of being unable to implement boundaries with her child, that parenting being questioned by Steve as part of that ongoing separation abuse. She feels out of control, she questions her ability to parent, and feels quite isolated as nobody understands, because what she's saying to us is that actually you've left the relationship, so things should be better now, where actually things are actually feeling almost worse in a way, because it's a different form of abuse that she almost didn't see coming. Within abuse, when you're in that relationship, you can almost predict behaviours, but actually post-separation abuse can look very different. Those emotional triggers for Kate, so the behaviours that she's seeing from Isabella, although she knows deep down that's her child and she still loves and cares for her, her fight or flight is kicking in whenever she's triggered by something that would reflect some form of Steve's behaviours. So for some parents and families, that can even be a certain look and glint in their eye. It can be a certain smirk. It can be a phrase that's said. It can be really sort of to an outsider what seem as quite minor, but for a victim and survivor of abuse can be extremely triggering. That in turn is delaying her recovery of that abuse, and we know that the recovery of the parent is so vital for the recovery of the children as well. And the last one we've got on this list is how the children's experiences will shape future identity and relationships. So that current lack of understanding of what a healthy relationship looks like. We've got those elements of toxic masculinity from Steve towards Jack around, you need to man up, you're pathetic and weak. And we know that particularly within our education systems and young people at the minute is such a wider issue that we're really sort of navigating through. And that sense of power and control as well. So we've got both children actually battling with a sense of power and control, but in very different ways. So we've got Isabella, who's trying to keep power and control by being quite aggressive and quite physical, whereas we've got Jack trying to keep power and control in a way of that sort of separation from Kate. Actually, that being separated from her gives him a real sense of anxiety. So they both come from a very similar fear response, but are looking very different. Thank you everyone for all the brilliant ideas as well. There was lots of chat in the chat box. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Kerry. So we're going to take that case study now and sort of look at what can be done by IDAS and what can be done by other agencies to really support this family moving forward. So IDAS can do a lot of signposting and making of onward referrals to other agencies to meet all of the needs that we've sort of identified for that family. So this might include, but isn't limited to, the child maintenance service, mental health support including CAMS, counselling services, the family's GP, it might be referrals to PEGS, NSPCC, children's social care, looking at legal advice or even family court support within IDAS, as we mentioned earlier. Offering emotional and practical support to all members of the family, so Kate and the children, around the situations that they find themselves in now and their experiences. So offering them that sort of time and space to discuss what they've been through and having somebody really listen to that and validate their experiences. We can complete safety planning with the family. So this again would be sort of everybody individually. So exploring their support networks, what their safe places are, their safe people, and then also looking at any further safety needs, such as that target hardening to help them stay safe within the home. So that might be things like looking at cameras, window alarms, door alarms, or anything else safety-wise in the home to manage those CAPFA behaviours that are present as well. We'll be looking at sort of parental support, so that's both peer support with the IDAS online groups and that support with an allocated worker, offering that one-to-one, face-to-face or phone support with Kate throughout her attendance at the groups and then onwards as well as we support the children. We'd be completing multi-agency working, so working with other agencies to support the whole family, all of their needs, offering them advice and support regarding strategies and the understanding of the domestic abuse and the post-separation abuse that's sort of currently ongoing. And we would attend and host multi-agency meetings such as Team Around the Family meetings, child protection meetings and child in need meetings. We could do one-to-one support sessions with the children, focusing on their individual needs, which we will explore in more detail in a moment. So this might be meeting with them weekly or bi-weekly, creating a support plan of what they feel they would like that support with and how they would like to access that. Exploring areas like their coping strategies, healthy relationships, safety planning, both physical safety and their emotional safety, exploring their self-esteem and identity, and understanding their fear responses and the emotional impact these have as sort of forming that education, which can really help with them moving forward. We'd also complete risk assessments with the family, so that would sort of be with Kate and with the children where appropriate, using the DASH tool, which allows us to identify risks to the family and safety plan accordingly. We would review these on a 6-weekly basis, 4 weekly if we deem the family to be high risk, allowing us to monitor any changes in behaviour and be proactive rather than reactive. And I think with the sort of case study that we've used here, we'd be completing a DASH around Steve's behaviour and sort of that ongoing abuse that we're seeing, but also around Isabella's behaviour to help with monitoring the CAP for behaviours and managing that risk. Next slide, please, Kate. Okay, so now we're going to sort of look at what other professionals can do as well to help support the family. So again, similar to IDAS, it might be looking at signposting and making onward referrals, which might be to the Children and Family Service. It might be for that mental health support or other agencies like Children's Social Care. We'd look at sort of being curious, so monitoring any changes in behaviour that you might see within your setting, looking at the presentation of both the children and the safe parent, and keeping clear, concise records of any concerns you have, including any interactions you've had with the perpetrator to really capture that whole picture around what's going on for that family. Safety planning, again, which can be completed by any service with a young person. Often this is sort of already being completed without people being aware of it. So it might be things like providing the children a time-out pass from class, giving them time to go and have a moment to sort of regulate themselves. It might be offering them that pastoral support, or it might be more practical things as well, like separate parents' evenings, so that Kate's not having to come into contact with Steve, and that sort of manages that risk as well. Listening and validating. So we know that survivors can sometimes struggle to reach out for that support, and they can feel that there isn't sort of that network in place for them. But when they feel heard and validated, they're more likely to engage effectively moving forward with other agencies as well. I think this is especially the case around sort of CAP behaviours. There can often be quite a lot of shame and guilt sort of attached to those behaviours for parents, feeling like they're sort of really isolated and on their own. So again, that sort of listening and that validation is really crucial to them then accessing further support and just being able to sort of support them to improve their situation. Again, that multi-agency working, so reaching out to relevant services for confidential advice and resources. So this can be done sort of even if a family doesn't consent to a referral, a professional could sort of call up another service, asking them for advice and support around the situation. If multiple services are already involved, about that sort of working together, engaging in those multi-agency meetings and things like that, we can see that survivors are more likely to recover when they feel that all services are working with them sort of cohesively, so they're not having to repeat themselves or keep having to go back through things. It's just sort of that network that's offering that real wraparound support. Using all opportunities like parents' evenings, meetings regarding attendance to show that professional curiosity, So it might be like sharing any concerns that you've got, sharing any worries, asking those questions and trying to start those conversations with Kate to really understand what's going on and how we can help them. And then finally, not waiting. So not waiting to make a referral until things have reached sort of a crisis situation, being curious from the very beginning, discussing options and actions that can be taken. We do know as well that sometimes referrals can take a lot of time to be processed and for that support to begin. So, you know, if we're considering sort of the school environment, not waiting until the last week of term for a referral to be put in, because that can sometimes delay support starting with the school holidays and stuff. So just keeping that timing in mind to ensure there's no delays. Thank you. Next slide. So we've really sort of moved on now to unpick some practical strategies for each of the children. So we're going to start with Jack and just look at some of the things that we could do to support him around some of the behaviours and emotions he's presenting with. So initially it might be looking at sort of supporting Jack around his emotions, and that might be using different resources like picture cards, social stories, or even creating a feelings hotel. So that's the idea that we create sort of a drawing or a model, however it would work for Jack. And each room has a feeling attached to it where he can include things that either make him feel that way or things he experiences in his body when he's sort of feeling that emotion, which can really help with that sort of understanding around emotions and can then aid us in managing them moving forward. Might be creating a worry monster or a worry jar with Jack, providing him a space to write down his worries and deposit them, especially if he's not ready to talk about them. This can be really key in sort of managing those anxieties, especially ones that are sort of outside of his control. Offering Jack regulation periods. So even if a young person is not appearing dysregulated, they can benefit from time out of the classroom to recharge and regulate. For young people who are impacted by abuse, dysregulation is often a build-up of events and not just one trigger. So they can benefit from having that quiet time or some space doing something they enjoy with someone they trust. That might also be a really good time to then do other activities with a young person when they are calm and regulated. So it might be sort of utilising resources like a stress bucket. So asking Jack to sort of include in this bucket all the things that are underlying his emotions, that are causing him the stress, that are causing him the anxiety, to help start those conversations around that. We might look at Jack's circles of control, so helping him to establish the things that he can control and those things that he can't control, again improving the management of any attached anxieties. So just taking an example of a test that Jack might have in school, it might be looking at what's in his control, being sort of the planning for his revision, attending all of his classes and asking for any additional support from teachers. But outside of his control is the ultimate sort of content of the test and the outcome. So again, sort of visually looking at that, really helping him to manage those anxieties and things that we don't have that control over. We might complete strengths-based activities with Jack. So an example being creating an advert for a friend. So tasking him with advertising himself to a potential friend, looking at what he's good at, what's unique about him, what he enjoys and what's important to him, really getting him back in touch with himself and his identity, and looking for those strengths. We might do healthy relationships games with Jack, so looking at different scenarios in relationships and different behaviours, and then asking him to attach a red or a green flag based on whether he feels this is healthy or unhealthy. This really is quite a good resource to start in that discussion about different behaviours and getting that wider understanding of what Jack's views might be, and using the third party rather than Jack's direct relationships can be helpful to start those conversations and make sure he feels comfortable. We might play a game using a dice to help with safety planning. So it might be as simple as rolling the dice. You roll a 4 and you ask Jack, who are 4 people you feel safe with? You roll a 3, who are 3 people who you could talk to over the summer holidays? So again, this is challenging Jack to think about what actions he could take in situations where he feels unsafe, especially when, you know, he might be out of school for a period of time. Looking at Jack's coping strategies, So this might be sort of exploring some suggestion cards, which offer Jack different ways to cope when he's feeling overwhelmed. It might include sort of breathing techniques, sensory toys, or music. We could do a guided journey with Jack. So that's the idea that he sort of imagines his happy place, and it can be sort of a real place or a fictional place, whatever he can imagine, and then engaging the 5 senses to help ground him. So it might be looking at what he can see in this happy place, what he can smell, what he can feel, all of those different things that really help him to feel present and connected, and calming down sort of the other responses that might be going on. And then finally, we might create a calm kit with Jack. So that might be just using an old box or a bag, or even a pencil case, to include resources that help to settle him. So it's something that's sort of, you know, it might have sensory toys in there, headphones, if music is something that's soothing. It might have some chocolate in there, something that smells nice, notes perhaps written from Kate, lots of things that Jack can sort of retreat to help calm himself down. And I think the beauty of that is as well that it's portable, so it can be taken to school, it can be used at home, or it can be used during that contact as well. So it sort of addresses that separation anxiety, because it could be a way of Kate sort of helping Jack to feel connected to her whilst they're not together. Thank you. Next slide. Lovely. So we're now going to do the same for Isabella. So looking at some different strategies that might help to support her around some of the things that we're concerned about. So similar to Jack, looking at those strengths-based activities and goal planning. So often young people can lose sight of what's important to them, particularly when they're struggling. So it can be helpful to bring them back to that different perspective. So it might be us exploring with Isabella what her hopes and dreams are, whether she has a timeline of things that she'd like to achieve. They don't necessarily have to be big events. It can just be little things that are achievable to her to help with that boosting of that self-esteem. We might also do a behind the mask activity. So looking at behaviours on the outside that Isabella might be displaying, but her feelings on the inside as well. This can help to sort of address any negativity that Isabella might be feeling towards her behaviour, and really challenges any shame that she has attached to that, separating the behaviour from the person. We might also do some healthy relationship work with Isabella, using more age-appropriate resources. So we have the It's Okay, Not Okay booklet at IDAS, as well as an IDAS healthy relationship checklist that we could sort of discuss in relation to some of her friendships or previous relationships. We might look at the healthy relationship alphabet. So that's really just as simple as writing a healthy and an unhealthy behaviour for each letter of the alphabet, really getting that young person to think about what they feel is healthy and unhealthy. Or it might even be having conversations around sort of things that are going on in the media. So, you know, with sort of Isabella's age group, it might be things like Love Island. So having a chat about different behaviours that might be going on in those programmes and how she feels about them. We might explore Isabella's coping strategies. So obviously we've seen in the case study that she is using self-harm and alcohol as a way of managing her sort of feelings and emotions at the moment. So it might be exploring different apps and confidential services that she can access to sort of safety plan around this self-harm and alcohol. It might also be looking at sort of alternative coping strategies that she could eventually replace those unhealthy ones with, and drawing on her different interests. So it might be sort of art, so she could express herself through, you know, using colour or music, or even exercise as well. So if she has a physical need when she's feeling angry, it might be about us finding sort of safe ways for her to express that anger. So it could be safe things that she can throw or destroy, or even sort of going for a run, whatever it is she needs to sort of expel that in a safe way. We might explore different communication styles with Isabella. So this education can be really key in terms of support. So looking at the different styles of communication, such as aggressive, assertive and passive, looking at whether Isabella understands how she presents herself to other people, what are the positives and the negatives attached to each communication style, and how does she feel she's communicated to by others as well, to give that sort of rounded approach. We might look at that self-esteem building with Isabella to try and sort of boost that self-esteem in different ways, and also tackle that exploitation risk as well, trying to improve her confidence and how she feels about herself, and strengthen that identity, to sort of move away from those risk-taking behaviours. We might do an activity, sort of what gets on your goat. So trying to identify what Isabella's triggers are, especially around anger. So these might be things that present as sort of minor to us, but can be very triggering for a young person. So for example, it might be the sound of people chewing, feeling like she's being nagged, feeling like her siblings are touching her stuff, or even feeling left out. So it helps us to gain that wider understanding and build up a mutual respect with Isabella, allowing us to problem solve together once we understand what those triggers are, and how they're sort of causing, these behaviours further down the line. We might explore Isabella's self-care. So some strategies might be creating a self-care plan, so breaking it down into different areas of Isabella's life. So it might be sort of self-care she can do at school, self-care she can do at home, self-care she can do when she's at dad's. It might also be around sort of exploring her boundaries, what her goals are and things like that, as this whole picture of self-care, so that she can practice it in lots of different areas. We'd support Isabella around her emotions and understanding that anger. So it might be creating a different, a 4-step anger plan. So initially looking at the anger iceberg, which is a resource you're probably all familiar with, but exploring anger as that secondary emotion, but validating its purpose, again, to try and debunk that shame that might be felt. We might then move on to explore what the triggers are and how anger feels in Isabella's body using body maps, and then move on to look at safe spaces she can retreat to when she's feeling angry, and different coping mechanisms that she can try, and grounding strategies that she can try to help bring herself down from that anger, and address the underlying emotion. And then similar to Jack, sort of the regulation periods are really important as well. So when Isabella's in school, is there a pattern of behaviour for her? Is there certain lessons that she's finding more difficult? Is it that she sort of gets worse throughout the week? Really trying to address these things and see if there's anything that can be put in place to allow her time out, allow her regulation periods, before that escalation happens. And that can be similarly applied at home as well. Thank you. Next slide.
Thanks, Kira. So we're sort of on the last couple of slides and coming towards the end. I think we just popped in a couple of little feedback quotes, really. I think just to remind us, like, we've bombarded you with lots of information and lots of strategies and things, but to remind us the impact of that, really, and what that can mean. And even something as small as adjusting a timetable or giving somebody a pass to access pastoral care can make a really, really big difference. We appreciate that services are super busy within their own right and what they do, and there are these specialist services, but actually really sort of minor adaptations for families can be really, really beneficial and really powerful. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of pop these in, and then we've just got on the next slide, please, Kat, just a little reflection slide. So I think we've got about 8 minutes left till the end of the session. Just again to get you thinking, please use the chat box for feedback, reflection, any questions you've got, really, for the last sort of few minutes, and we'll try and get through as many as we can if there are questions. Yeah, so Georgina said that she wasn't aware that we supported with post-separation. So yeah, absolutely. That support continues all the way throughout, regardless of sort of what that looks like, and whether it be the children and family service that offer that support or whether it be the adult IDFA service. That's just dependent on the circumstances, really, of that post-separation abuse and where that risk level's at. But yeah, there's definitely options for that. Thanks, Steph. I've just realised on the slide as well, I haven't put our specific children's and families team direct email, so I'll pop that. So if anyone's got any queries, you can contact us direct through there, and one of us can pick up that query.
So someone's mentioned the support for under 18s who are in relationships which may be classed as abusive. So we sort of did mention that we would look at them on a case by case basis, I think, wouldn't we, Kerry? Depending on sort of what the situation's like now, and looking at that risk as well. So it may sit with the Children and Families Service if the relationship has ended, and we can do that piece of work around healthy relationships and abusive behaviours. But if that relationship perhaps is still ongoing and there is that level of risk there, then it might sit with our IDFA team, but they can absolutely access that support from IDAS. It's just that we would sort of look at it case by case to make sure it's the right service picking it up.
Okay, huge thank you to Kira and Kerry. That was so informative. I'm just going to move on to the next slide because I know that's got some contact details on and people may want to kind of capture those before they move on and finish.